Okay, let's dive in. Pike County, Ohio, 2016. 8 members of one family the Rhodens killed, executed really, across 3 different homes.
It's a case that just grabs you. The scale of it is shocking enough.
Right. But then there's this detail that always stood out. 3 little kids, babies really, all under 3. They were right there, and they were left completely unharmed.
Untouched. Amidst all that violence, it's one of the central mysteries, at least initially.
Exactly. So today we're going to really get into the layers of this. We're using the transcript from a pretty detailed YouTube documentary as our guide here. The aim is to unpack what happened, move past those first wild theories, and understand the core of this tragedy.
And those early theories were pretty varied, weren't they? Professional hit, drug cartels, maybe?
Yeah, even the cornbread mafia got mentioned. There was this initial void, right? No shell casings left behind. The family dogs apparently didn't bark. Victims' cell phones missing.
It screamed calculation, but the who and why were just huge question marks. No forced entry anywhere either.
So the mission for this deep dive is to trace how investigators went from that confusion to uncovering, well, a very personal and deeply chilling reality. It points towards a custody dispute, and specifically, the Wagner family.
Let's start at the beginning, though. The discovery.
Right. Bobby Joe Manley finds Christopher Rhoden Sr. first, makes that absolutely frantic 911 call.
And the scene he walks into, I mean, Chris Sr. had 9 gunshot wounds. 9, several to the head.
Just brutal. And Gary Rhoden, his cousin, forensics, found a muzzle stamp. So point-blank range.
Yeah. Then you have the second location, Frankie Rhoden and his fiancée, Hannah Hazel Gilley.
And their 6-month-old daughter, right there between them, alive.
Unharmed. It's almost unbelievable.
Then the third trailer, Dana Rhoden, Chris Sr.'s ex-wife, and their kids, Chris Jr. and Hannah Rhoden.
And again, Hannah's newborn, just days old, found trying to nurse, spared.
But Hannah's 2-year-old Sophia wasn't there that night, which becomes crucial later.
And finally, Kenneth Rhoden, Chris Sr.'s brother, found dead at his own place miles away. Single gunshot.
So 8 victims, 4 locations, 3 children spared. The details are stark. No forced entry, silent dogs, missing phones.
It really starts to chip away at those outside professionals' theories, doesn't it?
It does. It suggests the victims knew their attackers, or at least didn't perceive them as an immediate threat when they arrived.
So those initial ideas, Mexican cartels, cornbread mafia, they seemed plausible for a minute because, let's be honest, the Rhoden family wasn't entirely clean.
Right, there were brushes with the law, definitely. The marijuana grow operation found on Chris Sr.'s property was significant.
And rumors of a cockfighting ring, things like that. So you can see why law enforcement might initially look outwards.
But like you said, the specifics just didn't quite line up. Killing almost an entire family, but carefully sparing the youngest children, it feels different, more personal.
Exactly. There wasn't any hard evidence, no chatter, nothing concrete linking any organized crime group to the specific, almost surgical yet brutal event.
So the investigation had to pivot. And that's when the focus starts to shift, really zeroing in on the Wagner family.
And this is where the motive starts to crystallize, moving away from drugs or organized crime and something much closer to home.
Introduce the Wagners for us. Who were they in relation to the Rhodens?
Well, the patriarch, Billy Wagner, apparently had some history with Chris Rhoden Sr. Maybe some business dealings, maybe just knew each other from the community.
Okay.
But the really key relationship was between Billy's son, Jake Wagner, and Chris Sr.'s daughter, Hannah Rhoden.
They had a child together, right?
Yeah.
Sophia, the little girl who wasn't there the night of the killings.
That's right. Their relationship started very young. When Hannah was just a teenager, they had Sophia. Initially, Chris Sr. seemed okay with it, apparently laid down some rules.
But it sounds like things went sour.
Very sour. Sources describe the relationship as turbulent, volatile. And eventually, Hannah left Jake. She described the Wagner household as a toxic environment.
That's a strong statement. And then there was that Facebook post she made.
Yeah, that seems incredibly important in hindsight. Hannah posted something saying she would never sign papers to give up custody of Sophia.
Okay. Just asserting her rights as a mother.
But here's the disturbing part. Jake and his mother, Angela Wagner, were apparently monitoring her account. They'd hacked into it. They saw the post.
Wow. That speaks volumes about control and possessiveness. They're watching her every move, essentially.
It certainly points that way. And then Hannah moved on. She started a new relationship with a man named Charlie Gilley.
And she got pregnant again.
Yes. And this, according to Jake's later confession and the prosecution's case, seems to have been the breaking point. the absolute trigger for the Wagners.
The idea of another man raising a child with Hannah, maybe solidifying her independence, maybe complicating their access to Sophia.
It appears they saw it as an unacceptable development, something that needed a drastic, unthinkable solution.
And this leads to that alleged family meeting.
Correct. The prosecution laid out this narrative of a meeting where the four Wagners, Billy, Angela, and their sons, Jake and George, discussed, planned, and effectively voted on killing members of the Rhoden family.
Voted like it was a business decision.
Chillingly, yes. The initial plan apparently targeted 7 people. Anyone they saw as a potential obstacle to them getting permanent sole custody of Sophia.
The motive becomes crystal clear then. It's all about custody. Complete control over Sophia.
That was the core driver, according to the investigation and Jake's confession. Everything flowed from that desire.
And the level of planning that followed, it's just staggering.
Oh, absolutely meticulous. This wasn't spontaneous. They bought athletic shoes, but deliberately in the wrong sizes.
To confuse investigators if footprints were found.
Precisely. They acquired specific firearms, .22 caliber long rifles, semi-automatic pistols, likely chosen because they're easier to suppress.
And they bought or made suppressors, silencers basically, and brass catchers too.
Yeah.
To collect the ejected shell casings.
Yes. Minimizing noise, minimizing physical evidence left at the scenes, every detail considered.
Didn't they practice shooting extensively as well?
They did. Investigators found evidence of target practice, spent bullets, even remnants of a homemade suppressor out in the woods near the Wagner property.
Okay, so they're preparing firearms, planning evidence disposal. What else?
They bought a cell phone jamming device.
To block calls for help.
Exactly. Isolate the victims completely. And almost like something out of a spy movie, they dyed their hair to change their appearance.
Unreal. And Angela Wagner's role in this planning phase.
Beyond participating in the decision, a key accusation is that she forged custody documents.
Forged them how?
Creating fake papers that supposedly showed Hannah Rhoden granting custody of Sophia to the Wagners if anything happened to her. A way to legitimize their claim after the fact.
A pre-planned justification. And they watched the Rhodens.
Yes, they staked out the homes, learned their routines. When people came and went, it was cold, calculated reconnaissance.
So the night itself, it happened shortly after Hannah's second baby, with Charlie Gilly, is born.
Yes, and crucially, Sophia was staying with the Wagners that night.
Okay.
Billy Wagner allegedly gets into Chris Rhoden Sr.'s home first. Maybe a pretext, maybe Chris let him in willingly, not suspecting anything.
And then the coordinated attacks begin across the different locations. Swift, brutal.
Executed by Jake, George, and Billy, according to Jake's confession.
But always intentionally sparing the very young children.
Yes. The objective wasn't annihilation, it was targeted elimination to secure custody of Sophia. The children themselves weren't seen as obstacles.
The aftermath is just as calculated, isn't it? The cover-up.
Absolutely. They had a plan for that too. Abandoning the truck they used, getting rid of the clothes and shoes they wore.
And the weapons. The disposal method was pretty extreme.
It really was. They put the guns, shell casings, pieces of the suppressors into buckets.
And filled them with concrete.
Filled them with concrete, let them set, and then dumped them into a local lake, using them like boat anchors. A serious effort to make the evidence disappear forever.
Which almost worked. For a while.
For a surprisingly long time. Then there's that move to Alaska.
Right. They just packed up and left Ohio not long after the murders. Seems like fleeing, obviously.
It does. But then, maybe a year or so later, they come back.
Which is also strange. Why come back to Pike County?
It's baffling. They tried to settle back in. Jake even got married again, but things seemed off.
Yeah, didn't Jake's new wife leave him pretty quickly? And Angela, his mother, left too?
That's right. Both departures were quite abrupt, apparently. And you have to imagine, for investigators who are likely already looking closely at the family, those sudden exits would raise huge red flags.
Yeah, that doesn't seem like normal family dynamics, even for a family under stress. It suggests something deeper was wrong.
Agreed. And that probably intensified the investigation. We know law enforcement started using more covert methods.
Like listening devices. Bugs.
Yes, bugs reportedly placed in their work trucks, phone taps. Standard procedure when suspicion hardens on particular individuals. They were gathering intelligence, listening for inconsistencies, maybe even admissions.
And eventually, the pressure told. Jake Wagner cracked.
He did. He confessed, pleaded guilty to all 23 charges against him, including 8 counts of aggravated murder.
And his confession laid it all out.
Pretty much. He admitted his direct role, saying he personally killed 5 of the 8 victims.
5. including Hannah Rhoden, the mother of his child.
Yes. He implicated his father, Billy, and brother, George, in the other 3 killings. And he detailed Angela's involvement in the planning, the cover-up, the forgery. It was full accounting.
Did they find evidence to back up his story? Because confessions can sometimes be unreliable.
Oh, they found significant corroborating evidence, text messages between the Wagners around the time of the murders that seemed incriminating.
Okay.
And crucially, they recovered those concrete buckets from the lake.
No way. They found the murder weapons.
Yes. Ballistics testing matched bullets fired from those recovered guns to the bullets found in the victims.
That's huge. The smoking gun, literally.
Absolutely. Plus, the evidence of the homemade suppressors found near their property matched Jake's description. It all started fitting together, painting a very damning picture consistent with his confession.
So where do things stand now legally?
Well, Jake Wagner took a plea deal to avoid the death penalty. He got life in prison, but with a possibility of parole after, I believe, 32 years.
Which caused some controversy, understandably.
Definitely. Angela Wagner also took a plea deal for conspiracy and other charges and received a 30-year sentence.
Okay. And the other brother, George?
George Wagner IV maintained his innocence and went to trial. He was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to 8 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole.
So he'll never get out. What about the father, Billy?
George of Billy Wagner III, the father. His trial is still pending as of our source material. He's also pleaded not guilty.
It's just, the devastation is immense. Those surviving children growing up knowing what happened.
Yeah.
The impact on that community.
Unimaginable trauma. And the source material, the documentary, raises a couple of lingering questions, too.
Like what?
Like, what was the specific thing that really made law enforcement lock onto the Wagners so hard? Was there one critical tip, one piece of evidence early on? The documentary doesn't definitively say.
That's interesting. We know the outcome, but maybe not the exact trigger point for the intense focus.
Right. And the other big one, given the calculated brutality, is the debate around the death penalty, whether it should have remained on the table, especially for Jake, given his admissions.
That's always a complex and deeply divisive issue in cases like this.
Always.
So, pulling it all together, the takeaway is stark. This wasn't random cartel violence or some shadowy organization. It was intensely personal.
Utterly personal. A meticulously planned massacre born from a custody dispute orchestrated by one family against another.
The level of deception, the cold-blooded planning, the cover-up, it's almost beyond comprehension.
It truly is. The lengths they went to, driven by this absolute need to control Sophia's future, their perceived entitlement to her.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? About obsession, control, how far people might go for what they believe is theirs. What does a case like this dark side of family dynamics, really reveal about the potential for darkness when personal desires run unchecked? Something to really consider.